Hi, my name's Stuart Scurti. I'm a PSG account manager focused on corporate accounts. Today, we're here with Mark Hurd as part of the ongoing CEO interview series, and Mark's agreed to sit down with us and answer a few questions. These questions come from our all-employee meetings around the world, and this gives Mark the opportunity to go into these questions a little bit more depth and thought. Interestingly enough, these questions, about 50% of them today will be based on our corporate strategy. So, Mark, thank you for sitting down with us.
Sure.
We appreciate your time, and we'll get going.
Okay.
Is HP's focus shifting from hardware and software to services? And can you speak a little bit about the profit margin and the potential growth in those segments?
Well, I'd be careful, Stuart, to say that we're shifting from hardware to a software to a services strategy. What we really tried to go through is a process of really building our infrastructure capabilities, call those hardware, but actually a series of capabilities from an infrastructure perspective to complement that with a software capability and to complement that with a services capability. I think a better way to think about it would be the interconnections between the infrastructure business and the software business, and the interconnection between those businesses and the services business. As a couple of examples, I think the key to the future of the services business has a lot to do with automation, server management, storage management, data center management, et cetera. And the clear alignment to me in our ability to better provision those services is the alignment of those software assets to our services assets. The opportunity for us to pull through infrastructure, whether that's as part of an outsourcing contract or that's part of a remote sort of service delivery capability through the cloud from a remote data center. All of those things play together. So what we're really trying to build is an ecosystem as opposed to pitting one against the other or looking at different margins. We're looking at the margin of the aggregate company. And I think, last point I'll make on this so we don't ramble on too long about it is when you look at the world today, more data created in the next 4 years in the history of the planet. And only 3% of the world's data today is digitized. That's doubling every 18 months. And all of that has to get processed. All of it's got to get stored. All of it's got to get moved. All of it's got to get shared, visualized, printed, and serviced. And the software that interconnects all that, in my view, that's one integrated ecosystem, not a this versus that.
Right. Well, on that, Mark, what areas do you want to invest in moving forward? And do you see gaps in our portfolio that you might want to address by acquisition?
So I think you got to look at it multidimensionally, and I'll try again not to make this too complicated. We obviously have a series of, and think of this as four quadrants. So we clearly have a set of things in the company that we want to do better, whether that's cost issues, getting our sales force transformed, many things that we've got to do in the company to get it to operate today as well as it can operate. Right. I think your question becomes another question. Looking at our portfolio today, what things would we like to improve in our portfolio to supplement it or to complement it? I think you have to, in addition, look through a couple of other lenses. One is what competition's doing, and then I think you also have to look at the secular trends. When you look at trends like mobility, you look at trends like digitization that we talked about earlier, trends like video, delivering IT versus different services models, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of these big sector trends. And so you have to then make sure you don't get caught in complementing today's portfolio that may not align to where the world's headed, as opposed to sort of intersecting all of the above. Right. So we're going through a process now that says the first quadrant, which I talked about, which is just getting HP to perform better today and making it as capable as it possibly can. We're going to do that regardless. That has tremendous opportunities for today's growth, today's operating profit, today's cash flow. There are clearly parts of the portfolio that we want to supplement that do align with future secular trends. As I mentioned before, there's going to be more processing. There's going to be more data stored than the history of the planet, et cetera, et cetera. But you got to make sure you're investing in tomorrow, not investing in yesterday. So it's important when we talk about that portfolio to make sure that we're lined up for tomorrow. So that causes us to make decisions around areas that we think are going to go scale. So I won't go through all of them in detail, but yeah, we're trying to intersect those 4 quadrants and get them lined up so that we can go grow not just in 2010 and 11, but 2012, 13, and 14.
Right, right. But it sounds like you've been thinking about those and have some of them identified in your head anyway.
I just made that up as we were talking. No, seriously, yeah, we think about this all the time, Stuart, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big deal for us to get, and I think, listen, it's the old story that, I think we've talked about in the company for a long time. You got to worry about today and tomorrow. You got to focus on growth and cost. You have to worry about the short term and the long term. There is no magic answer that gives you a binary focus on just one singular item. So you got to be able to do multiple things at the same time in order to be great. We do some things pretty darn well at HP.
Right.
I think for us to be, the best, I mean, literally the best,
Right.
You've got to be multidimensional in your ability to get things done.
One of the things I see in PSG, because I'm a PSG account manager, is the virtualization of the client really starting to take hold. And I kind of see in 2 or 3 years that the desktop notebook infrastructure won't be the same in corporate enterprise accounts. Maybe on the small medium business and retail, of course. But is that, virtualization's always been in the data center consolidation and whatnot, but for client virtualization, is
So I
that
think
one of the areas you see?
It's a good point you bring up. I mean, I think virtualization, again, more of if you look at secular trends, both in terms of where the world's headed, but also then technical trends, virtualization is clearly one of those. Right. But I think you'll see, trends at the desktop, trends from a mobile perspective at the data center and in the network. Right. So, I mean, think of something we don't talk about a lot in the company, Virtual Connect, which is coming out of our bladed, infrastructure more on the server side. Right. It has the ability now to virtualize the network. That now says instead of dedicated network connections, you can now virtualize that network capacity. You take somebody like Cisco, to your point, they want to virtualize the data center. Right. So you have to look again at competition. We want to virtualize the network coming out of the server side. Interesting battle that's going to take place. We're fairly well positioned in that. One of the reasons we've been aggressive on the thin client side is because of the fact that we see that virtualization coming at the desktop. I don't think it'll eliminate the fact that some users are going to need powerful capabilities on the desktop. The issue is I think the world will get more sophisticated. Companies will spend the time to figure out the road warrior needs a different solution than the highly analytical finance expert who's sitting doing a bunch of analytics every day, and that's going to be different from the call center operator who's basically just painting 5 or 6 screens back and forth all day. And that segmentation will occur, and that'll have a big effect not only on the device part of the business, but also on a Microsoft that's got tremendous issues with trying to sell a fairly big ticket item all the time to every user. And so, yeah, I think you're going to see coming dynamics, and that's why it's important to understand these trends and competition simultaneous to our portfolio.
Yeah, very good. Innovation. Historically speaking, innovation's been a key to HP's success. What role do you see innovation playing in our ongoing strategy? And what's your approach to fostering and investing in innovation?
I think it's a great question. I think, first of all, to your point, innovation's been at the heart of HP from, 1939. And there are multiple issues, I think, that go on with innovation. I think certainly you can find in the company tremendous examples of innovation over the course of the past few years. The guys in PSG that invented the TouchSmart stuff and some of the work that's about to come out in PSG, not only pretty cool, but stuff I like using. And some people that did some great work. The people that brought the blades to market back over the past 3-4 years, tremendous innovation coming out of ESS. And you could go on with a number of very, very impressive examples across the company. I think that when you look at R&D in the company, we spend about 5% of that on pure R. And it's important for us to get some level of value out of that R. And we try to align that R with those secular trends I mentioned earlier, so that we're actually aligning to sort of non-roadmap issues that are going to produce things that now then can be commercialized in terms of D. When you look at the D of R&D, and most companies that talk about R&D are spending D. Right. They're not spending R. you have to really get into the R&D or into the D to understand what's happening. And we have a lot of our D that is supporting existing products, SKU management, getting a new release of basically the same product we've got.
Right.
That isn't, in the way you described the question, driving on net new innovation. So there's two kinds of innovation. There's taking today's portfolio to meet tomorrow's needs, a better version of storage, a better version of a desktop, a better version of mobility. There's another kind of innovation, which is I simply changed the answer. I came in with a new technology that exponentially changed the game. And you want to make sure you've got the balance appropriately between that. And I think we have work to do, I'll leave it that way, as an opportunity to have more of our D towards the innovation side than towards the, and I'm sort of torquing this up for the sake of making a point, more of it on the innovation side than on the SKU management side. I'm sure that'll cause me to get lots of emails, which is fine. But at the end of the day, we want more of our R&D, particularly our D, trying to change the answer in the marketplace than simply maintaining today's answer in the market. It doesn't mean within that there aren't great examples of innovation, HP. There are, and I've just given you a couple. I could list off 5, 6 others, and I'm sorry I didn't hit all of them.
Right.
But we have opportunities to do yet better.
Yeah, the breakthrough technology.
That's right.
Right,
And
the
I
industry
think,
changing.
and it's not because no shortage of spending.
Right.
It really comes down to, and I say this to our IT guys all the time. People talk to me about IT budgets. CIOs do all the time. CEOs do all the time. And I tell them, you can't just tell me how much you spend. It's like telling me how much you spend in R&D.
Right.
You have to get underneath that to understand how much in IT is being spent on keeping the light on versus innovating your capabilities to a new level of business performance. It's no different in R&D. Tell me how much you're spending in D today just to keep your products in the market. Then tell me how much of D you're spending to truly change the landscape of the IT industry, and you're going to get different answers. So it's not just important how much you spend, it's actually maybe more important the mix of what you're spending and how you're focused.
So the fostering and investing part of the question did, it's a culture, right? So things that you're doing or things you're thinking of doing to foster that environment to a higher degree, maybe?
Well, at first it have to have a conversation. And with most problems that I find in the business world, framing the problem is the most important thing because it focuses where you get the answer.
Right.
So, to me, when you ask for, tell me about our D and tell me how it's spent and what you're trying to get out of it, starts a conversation.
Right.
And so I think you should just believe that we're on this. And we just have a lot of focus on trying to get more out of the D that we've got. It's not my instincts right now that the answer is just go spend another $1 billion in R&D, but to get more yield for what we got.
Very good.